Last time on Hasta, Alaska, we were lucky enough to find our way to a remote island at the top of Alaska for an Arctic adventure that we would never forget. We learnt about life at the top of the world and got to see real wild polar bears. This time we're headed to the other end of this humongous state to discover what summer life is like in southern Alaska. So, since our Arctic adventure, we drove south. And when I say we drove, I mean we drove and drove and drove. As is often the case during summer months in Alaska, it rained a lot. So much, in fact, that we had to miss out on some things like Denali National Park. But occasionally the sun did come out for a few minutes.
Oh my God, it's a double rainbow!
We stopped long enough on the way to snap the obligatory photo with the Into the Wild bus. I know, such tourists. And eventually we made it all the way to Anchorage and to a rather unusual airport.
We're here at the largest float plane airport in the world in Anchorage, Alaska. This entire lake here is an airport. It's probably one of the most beautiful airports I've ever seen. Check out this, it's not really a hangar, but these planes have got little bays here and they have these tiny little hangar type buildings and their own little gas tank supplies on the side. It's quite a cute little airport. Definitely interesting. In the summer months, the planes land with the floats. In the winter months, they land with skis, and the airport's only really closed for a few months a year during break up and freeze up when the ice forms and breaks up in spring.
After all the hard driving we'd been doing, our Kombi was crying out for some attention. So we met up with a local VW enthusiast at the Arctic Air Cool Club for a short cruise, and eventually connected with this guy, Ralphie.
Well, it's an 86 Doka, and we put an ALH TDI motor in it, and it does pretty good. It's a lot of fun, but you know, there's a lot cooler conversions now, like the 2.5 Subaru or any of the Subaru turbo motors. I think that's what we're gonna do next with it. Change it up a little. The heater is not the best during the winter, so that's what limits its driving capability. So
you're telling me that it's a problem because it doesn't get hot enough?
Yeah.
Our Kombi had sprung a little oil leak on the way here. When I say little, this leak was ridiculous. We had the Kombi cleaned up, fixed the leak, and it wasn't long before we were tackling other problems too. I've met a lot of mechanics over the past few years, but this guy, working all the way up here in Alaska, was honestly one of the most knowledgeable and an absolute godsend for us.
I can't show it. If we install it all the way in, you can see that the outer race has been spinning.
Unfortunately, the Kombi needed parts that we weren't carrying. But up in Alaska, would we be able to find them?
Let's see what that fits. Oh, it's got that late model number up to 67, so that's fine.
It turns out that back in the day, many old Volkswagens made it up the Alcan Highway, but not so many made it back. So there are in fact a bunch of supplies up here.
With the Kombi ready to complete the last miles of our Alaska expedition, Ralphie took us to meet his mates at the Anchorage Brewing Company. Any brew house with a VW parked inside is all right by us, and these guys certainly knew how to make a tasty beer. Here we made plans for our next big Alaska experience that was high on our bucket list. As it turns out, Ralphie's sister actually charters adventures out of a town 60 miles away in Whittier.
We're here at the Turnagain Arms, basically to see the largest boar tide in this part of the world. But what is a boar tide, you might be wondering? Boar tide is when the changing edge of the tide, which you normally can't see, is actually visible and forms a wave. So in this channel here, in the Turnagain Channel, basically the tide narrows and forms a wave, which is one of the largest in the world and definitely the largest in this region. So we're hoping that we are here in time to see it. It should be coming from that way any minute. Boar tide surfing is a little different. There is only one wave. If you miss it, you miss out. But if you catch it, you're in for one heck of a long ride. This is the longest tunnel in Alaska. It's a one-way tunnel shared by cars and trains. So they alternate every half an hour which direction the cars are going, with a little space for trains. And then in between journeys, they have to ventilate it with huge jets. Pretty cool. Whoa, this is gnarly. Check this out.
Oh, this is quite cool.
Quite cool. I'm on the train tracks, Leah. Please don't break down. Please don't break down. Please don't break down. That is definitely the coolest tunnel I've ever been in. That was awesome. We're here in Whittier in perfect Alaskan weather, and we're going on the Crazy Ray fishing boat, the world famous Crazy Ray fishing boat. Man, are we excited. You got the way to bottom point? Huh? You got one under.
Yeah, kiss.
Come on, give it a kiss. Give it a kiss.
Fishing charters like this are a lot of fun because the waters here are particularly productive. But for Alaskans, this isn't just a sport. It's also an important part of life up here for many locals.
So a lot of residents, you know, when they're coming out, they're looking to fill the freezer for the winter. So we do everything that we can to try to help facilitate that.
It's a good fish.
It's a good fish.
So a halibut is a flat bottom fish that is one of the most sought after fish in Alaska. It brings, you know, thousands upon thousands of tourists here every year. It's a fabulous fish for eating. It cooks very well. It requires a lot of patience to catch them. You usually set up a lot of bait and scent and then just kind of wait for them to show up.
We'd be staying the night at Port Ashton Lodge, an extremely remote retreat, miles and miles from the nearest road. And what a place it would be to wake up.
This is where we stayed last night, in the Port Ashton Lodge. Check it out. It's like a white rainbow, a mist rainbow. Have you ever seen anything like that before? This place is so cool.
We're on an island called Evans Island. We're the 4th island north of Montague, which is world-class deep-sea fishing, halibut, lingcod, multiple species of rockfish. Port Ashton started in 1918 as a herring saltery, and then in 1923 progressed to a salmon cannery. We purchased the property in 2004, and everything that is here was brought by us, our family. We like to extend Alaska hospitality to people all summer long.
Chums, dog salmon.
Being that we started out the next morning so remote, it meant that we were right in the best location and we could get straight into fishing.
So what we have here is a Chum Bomb. It's basically a lot of bait to get our scent down to the bottom, bring in the fish to us. We're going to drop this down and jig it around until the bag dissolves and all the bait's dropped and spread on the bottom. Then hopefully the fish will come in and we'll start getting them. So on our Chum Bomb here, the brown paper bag is recyclable, and so it doesn't impact the environment. And then our zip tie comes back up on our swivel, and we're completely environmentally safe here.
Go back.
Somebody else's jig. You guys hold up.
See, fishing.
You got one on?
Yeah. It's a monster.
Fatty.
Oh, cod.
You got one?
He got a cod.
Yes.
Oh shit, that's a nice one too.
Oh, he's picking
He got
fat.
a cod. He got the
Fish
cod
and
father.
chips.
Right on.
I always wanted the
Real one
cod.
runs to the haddock.
It's fish and chips.
Come on now, as hard as you've worked for this one,
You can make
you
me
at
kiss this one as well?
Yes, you gotta. Or at least you don't have to actually kiss it, but just
Look at the face on that thing.
pucker your lips a little bit. Pucker your lips a little bit.
Real quick.
Yeah, there you go. Come on.
Oh no, I'm good. No tongues.
No tongue.
Fish and chips. Get in my belly.
To get the crazy rave for this kind of experience, you have to book well in advance. But it's definitely worth making the effort and getting out on the water here. This was one of our bucket list Alaskan adventures, and we were stoked to have made these memories.
From here, it's onwards to the world-famous Kenai Peninsula, where we'll see if it's possible for us to live off the land, and also where we meet a family of 8 who grew up inside this incredible houseboat. But for that adventure, you'll have to wait until next time.